What is a keystone species, and how do they impact nature? Every species in an ecosystem relies on each other and have their own role to play. Keystone species play a vital role in impacting the population levels within an ecosystem. Often the apex predator regulates the prey species. Wolves are a keystone species to help maintain a healthy ecosystem by controlling prey species, allowing many plants and animals to flourish. They initiate the ripple effect on the ecosystem. Wolf numbers are decreasing year by year and are at risk of going extinct. What are the effects of losing wolves? An example of this has occurred in northeastern United States, where an influx of Lyme disease has been linked to the removal of wolves from the environment. How does one affect the other? It's nature's dirty needle. Pick at the strands of nature and you unravel the living world's complex handiwork. Wolves have been disliked and feared by farmers as they deplete livestock through attacks. In the 1600s in New England, Puritan settlers put a bounty on wolves, calling them fierce, blood-sucking persecutors. The bounty and a government-sponsored extermination program, combined with a loss of habitat as settlers turned the land for agriculture and clear-cutting, eradicated the wolves by the mid-1800s. How does the overhunting of wolves lead to the spread of Lyme disease? Without their fierce predator around, coyotes began to flourish. As omnivores and scavengers, coyotes will eat fruit, nuts, and vegetables, but their preferred diet is meat. They are predators that hunt for little mammals, such as rabbits, squirrels, and mice. But their natural enemy is the fox. Coyotes do not tolerate foxes. With nothing to keep the coyote population in check, the fox population in New England was decimated. Foxes prey on squirrels and mice. Without foxes, the mouse population exploded. Ticks love catching rides on mice. With so many willing chauffeurs around, the tiny passengers spread around like taxis in a city. All because of a lack of wolves. south-central interior region of British Columbia, at the confluence of the North and South Thompson rivers, nestled in the Thompson Valley, is the town called Kamloops, home of the Secwepemc people. The climate is semi-arid due to its rain shadow location, an area of land that has been forced to become a desert because of mountain ranges that block all plant-growing rainy weather. The area has been described as rolling ridges, spectral gulches, and ghostly mountains, desolate and morose. A discouraging land, forbidding in its weariness. Kamloops is a Shuswap word. It stands for where the rivers meet. Early French traders called the area Camp de Loups, meaning camp of wolves, after a folk story about an attack on a trader's camp led by a massive white wolf. The area west of Kamloops falls within a desert climate. Here exist many distinctive native plants and animals, such as ponderosa pines, Great Basin sagebrush, prickly pear cactus, black widow spiders, and rattlesnakes. To the north of Kamloops is the Lac de Bois grasslands. This protected area is a unique forest and grassland ecosystem dominated by fields of June grass and blue bunch wheatgrass. Amongst the fauna, sagebrush, eroded hoodoos, and sandstone canyons, this area is home to all kinds of animals, including bighorn sheep, cougars, badgers, black bears, mountain goats. Thompson Valley's unique climate has supported human life for 10,000 years through droughts, floods, geological disasters. On June 29, 2021, the temperature reached 47.3 degrees Celsius, 117.1 degrees Fahrenheit during a heat dome. Amongst this valley lies the delicate balance between nature and human habitation. The ongoing battle between urban growth and urban sprawl devours the valley. As urban sprawl and agriculture continue to spread, we inadvertently affect the delicate balance of nature, causing an unexpected outcome to wildlife from human interactions. Globally, many species are declining as a result of a variety of destructive human activities, particularly habitat loss, fragmentation and degradation, the widespread use of pesticides, herbicides, and other chemicals, and the effects of invasive species aggravated by runaway climate change. "40% of all land on Earth has been altered specifically for food production to support the growing human population. Agriculture alone is responsible for 90% of global deforestation and consumes 70% of the planet's fresh water, thereby pushing species that inhabit these ecologically sensitive areas towards extinction. Pesticides, vehicle collisions, shooting, entanglement in loose fences, hunting by imported predators, including domestic cats and dogs, and other man-made threats. Every interaction we have with nature creates a ripple effect.
Why are we here? What are we doing? And the biggest reason for that is just to try to save species, save our planet, say the big picture. And the way to do that is to have people connect with animals and wildlife and then want to save those animals and wildlife. If we are not aware of things, there is no passion there to preserve it. We're pretty fortunate here in Canada. A lot of wildlife is here in our backyard, but think if you're coming from a city, you have not seen these species or even had the opportunity to learn what they are like and make that personal connection with that animal and then wanting to go on and save those animals in the wild or save their habitat, because that's the bigger picture, is to save those habitats. I would say the majority are human-caused interactions. Hit by a car, caught by a cat. There are things you can do. You can put collars on your cat that are quite brightly colored. So there's a few things that you can research and look up and try and get for your cat that will help. Because I know not everybody will keep their cats indoors. That's not always reasonable. But you can definitely try and make it so your cat is less effective at catching those birds. Another one is strikes on windows. There's things we can do to our windows. There are so many things with bird feeders. You need to clean them every couple of weeks with a 10% bleach solution is very important, so it stops transmission of some of the diseases we are seeing. In those bird feeders, there's a lot of waste, and then they can actually transmit diseases back and forth, so it's actually important to keep those clean. To remove your bird feeders from your yard in the summertime when the bears are up, and don't put them out again until the fall when the bears are back down. Young animals, we get a lot of orphaned animals, and that can be, I'm not always sure what has happened to the animals, but again, it could be the parent was killed by a car or a cat or, something. Often it's somehow directly or indirectly related to the things that we do. We get between 400 and over 500 animals. Last year we had over 500. Of those animals to rehabilitation, probably only about 50% make it back out, because When we get them in, a lot of the times they are very ill or very hurt, and there's just nothing we can do to bring them around. Orphan animals, obviously, we have a much better success rate with the young ones that come in. We can usually get them grown up and released. It's just when we're getting things in that have an injury, and animals will hide their illness, so a lot of times by the time they're found by people and they're down on the ground, they're very sick. There's so many things we can do to make our wild animals a lot safer. We can cohabitate better, so we are keeping our wild animals wild. It's a really big problem what's going on. Some people just want to give up. I personally sometimes do. There's just too much going on. There's habitat loss. How am I going to save the rainforest? But there's so many things we can do as individuals to change the lives of the animals around us. So one of the examples we like to use here is when you're eating an apple and you know it's biodegradable, you're finished, you're driving your car down the highway, you're just going to throw that apple core out the window. But you don't think about what that might do. So in the rehab department, we get a ton of animals that are hit by cars. And what has happened is you've thrown that apple core or your whatever it was out the window. An animal now has come to the side of the road to eat it. It was maybe a mouse. That mouse is now going to be caught by a hawk. That hawk coming down to get that mouse gets hit by a car. And then that hawk is now on the side of the road, and you have a coyote that comes to eat the hawk and the mouse. It also gets hit by a car. And then it goes on. So you get the picture. So basically, by doing those things, we're attracting animals to the sides of the roads, which then puts them at risk for being hit by vehicles. So the Comodo bear was a rehabilitation bear, so it was brought to a rehabilitation place up in the northern BC. And it was released, just like many of the bears are, but he found himself getting himself into trouble with conflict with people. So he had wandered into some camps and was deemed a dangerous bear. So at the point when the bear has been several times had conflicts with humans, they won't relocate them. He had been relocated and it was not successful. So the only option for him was to come into captivity. Our role in when an animal has to be destroyed, it was basically, you did this, and you can't point the finger at anyone else but yourself. We have to take responsibility for what we have done. When an animal becomes habituated, such as a bear or even a raccoon or whatever it may be, it's because we haven't been responsible enough with our own wastes and the way we are living, and we have made those animals comfortable here. We have to take responsibility in what we have done to create those animals and make changes so they will stay wild. We can make a difference. We can save this planet. We can save those ecosystems. It's not a lost cause and it's not too late.
Badgers are known as a grassland species or an open forest species. They certainly will use a variety of habitats. We do find them mostly associated with grasslands. They provide a number of ecosystem services for us. They till the soil, which brings up seeds and so on that are buried. They help establishment of grasses. They increase infiltration of moisture into the soil. They provide habitats for other species. Burrowing owls, gopher snakes, Great Basin spadefoots are all known to use badger burrows for winter retreats, daily retreats. And they eat lots of rodents, ground squirrels, marmots, these animals that are basically, they're pests. Badgers generally only do good. They control pest populations of rodents and those sorts of things that are causing damage. With certain individuals, are kind of like snakes, they're kind of like bats, and you either love them or you hate them, it seems, with certain ranchers, certain farmers, certain landowners. They will forage into hayfields and so on, but they'll go in and they'll clean out the ground squirrels. So they're providing those ecosystem services. The majority of their burrows are actually located on hillsides. They're located off of ranchers' hayfields and so on. They don't necessarily like having their burrows tilled. The burrows that they'll raise their young in, the natal burrows, they'll have those out of hayfields and so on. It's more on slopes that they can't farm, so they may graze those areas, but certainly wouldn't be in a hayfield or something like that. The leading cause of badger mortality is collisions with vehicles. Road mortality has been going on for a long time. We have more vehicles on our roads now. We also are improving our roads, our highways, so not only do we have more traffic, but we've got more lanes of traffic as well, and it makes it harder for them to cross the roads. Between Kamloops and Pritchard on Highway 1, where badger mortality is the highest. I think badgers down there are having a harder time, mostly because the habitat is valley bottom habitat, and at the valley bottoms you have the major highways, and the two come into conflict. And so I think there are locations where badgers are having a much harder time than others. The physical issue is just the lack of habitat connectivity. So you've got these major highways that are running through badger habitat, and badgers are not good at crossing roads. They seem to just burst right across the road, and they're being struck by vehicles and killed. There are a number of things that we can do in order to facilitate not only badger but other species movements under the highway. Putting culverts in specific areas where we know badgers and other animals are crossing the highway. There are major travel corridors for deer, moose, coyotes. We've got long-tailed weasels, least weasels, and they're taking their young through the culverts with them, and they seem to be passing that information on. To allow certain species to move under the highway will really help reduce animal mortalities. As much as they're great swimmers, they don't like to get their feet wet. If culverts were installed on a slight gradient throughout the province, no matter where they are, animals will use them. Badger population reduction is mainly attributed to road mortality, but then habitat loss is the other main concern with maintaining viable badger populations. So particularly the Okanagan, where there's very little crown land left. Thompson region, same thing, there's more urban sprawl in those areas, more vehicles on the highway, highway improvements, loss of habitat. Yeah, it's all of those factors.
Burrowing owls, it's an interesting little bird. It is an owl. It's a bird of prey. They live in abandoned badger burrows or marmot holes, these places where they can raise their young in relative safety. However, as time has gone on, their numbers have declined, along with the burrowing mammals that dug their holes in the first place. A lot of the holes that the birds would use have just disappeared. The problem is that we don't have many badgers left. A lot of the badger population is in severe decline. The burrowing owl, they were a species that had essentially been extirpated, that is, wiped out of British Columbia altogether in their native habitat. And I was convinced that we had to do better. That's why we started to work on a program to try to restore their population to British Columbia. We live in a world where biodiversity is in decline. That is a huge concern because of the dependency of all species upon one another. We need to protect and maintain habitat in its most pristine form wherever we possibly can for all species. In the case of burrowing owls live in semi-arid grasslands. That's farming country. Burrowing owls actually coexist very nicely with the cattle industry and that sort of thing. There's also the issue of urbanization, and we're seeing many of these grassland areas now that are under incredible threat from the growth of humanity and basically the massive changes that are being made to habitat. Looking just outside of Kamloops, many of the grassland areas that once existed but are now under concrete and buildings and have been completely and utterly changed their appearance and their ability to support any other form of wildlife other than humans. So this is a huge problem, not just for burrowing owls, but for the world over. All I would say as far as what we should be doing as human beings is pay attention. Just pay attention to other species other than ourselves, because while we may be the dominant species on this planet, we need to protect all species and the diversity of species for the world. It will protect us at the same time that we're protecting them. So paying attention to those sorts of things, the things that we normally do. Walk lightly on the earth. Try not to damage habitat that should be left for other species. Obviously, if we're in a situation where you see wildlife, stay away from them. Don't stress them, especially where many of the species that you're going to be encountering might be in the middle of nesting or breeding season. It's more about how we live our lives so that we can be better in touch with the earth and how we can make sure that the world itself is not suffering. Basically, things like waste and how we recycle. Of course, pollution. Everything we do like that is a contribution to species around the world. Not just, it doesn't have to be right in front of your face. It's what you do ultimately that's going to have a huge impact over time on many different species. We need that kind of corporate support for activities that are going to protect wildlife throughout our province and throughout the world for that matter. It's not just burrowing owls, it's the state of our world. I just think we need to walk softly on the earth. When I say walk softly, you can take that with various meanings. First of all, things like if you're in grassland areas, for example, be very careful where you tread. You might actually step onto a Vesper sparrow nest. There's a risk of fire in some cases. There's the risk of introducing invasive species with your presence. As far as burrowing owls are concerned, that would be important for the grassland habitats that they're in. I don't want to leave this world without there being burrowing owls for you to see in the future. We can honestly say that the animals that we grew up with are still here when we die. Maybe that's a good thing.